That is one thing about Firefox versus Chromium in Linux. Firefox is slower to load tabs.
Well, when I got about uh, probably 15, 16 tabs to open up suddenly,
Yeah,
not one at a time. These are all shot at one shot.
yeah. The text is a bit blurry.
Don't know offhand why, but this is a 7th Gen I-Core Linux computer.
It's usually a browser issue, and it sometimes happens in Firefox under Linux. It cleared up now.
Hmm.
Firefox, Linux, and Zoom seem to do it.
Well, at any rate, what I got here, I was hoping some of the people that haven't shown up in a long time that would be considered newbies would show up. And I have a video here of what Linux is. So I'm going to play a bit of it, and I'm not going to
Most
play
people
it.
have heard of Linux, even if they don't know what it really is. But what is it? In this video, I'll cover what it is, how you can use it, software, drivers, and I'm going to touch on security and antivirus, or I should say why you don't need antivirus. Technically, Linux is just a kernel, the core component of the operating system that interacts with your hardware and various running processes. What you see when looking at desktops like this is really called GNU Linux or GNU Linux, where GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. GNU is a free and open source collection of software. There's controversy on the whole Linux and GNU Linux naming, and both have valid points, but for simplicity, we'll just call the general operating system here Linux. The kernel, as I mentioned, desktops like this is really called GNU Linux or GNU Linux, where GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. GNU is a free and open source collection of software. There's controversy on the whole Linux and GNU Linux naming, and both have valid points, but for simplicity, we'll just call the general operating system here Linux. The kernel, as I mentioned, is the core. It talks to your hardware and includes built-in drivers, networking, and power management called GNU Linux or GNU Linux, where GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. GNU is a free and open source collection of software. There's controversy on the whole Linux and GNU Linux naming, and both have valid points, but for simplicity, we'll just call the general operating system here Linux. The kernel, as I mentioned, is the core. It talks to your hardware and includes built-in drivers, networking, and power management, among many other things. Then, what you see and interact with are the display managers and desktop or window managers, which are highly customizable. A quick history note here. The Linux kernel was written in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. It was written to be a binary compatible clone of Unix. Linus was using another Unix-like operating system called Minix, but due to its licensing restrictions, he decided to write his own kernel from scratch and incorporated GNU programs to run within it. He then released the code to the world and then placed it under the GPL license, which allows everyone to see the source code and contribute to it by suggesting code changes, fixes, and improvements. It is still open source to this day, which allows anyone from the community to contribute to its development or even create their own versions with different features. You'll notice when seeing various Linux desktops is that there's a vast variety of how they look and operate. That's because it can be configured however you like in a very modular way, and you can mix and match whatever components you wish to use. There's also lots of theming possible on top of this as well. Common desktops you'll see are GNOME, KDE, Cinnamon, XFCE, and many more. You can also customize each of these to make them look and behave however you wish by reconfiguring them, adding additional components, or mixing and matching different desktop components together. You can even make one desktop environment look like another. Each has their own way to help manage your workflow, and none are really the best. It's just a matter of preference. So if you're looking to try Linux for the first time, it's best to try different things in virtual machines first to see what you prefer. It's also possible to install multiple desktop environments at the same time, and then you can switch between them when you log in. But what do you download to get started, and what software can you run? First of all, because of the nature of Linux being free and open source, anyone can take one version and customize it to create a new one with a different name, even you and me, provided you have the time and resources, that is. All the source code is available, so you can rewrite whatever you want, recompile it, and redistribute it. These different versions of Linux, or flavors, are called distributions, or distros for short. You may have heard of Ubuntu, and this is what's known as a distro. It's a specific collection of software packages that create the operating system and is managed by teams of developers and maintainers. There's also Linux Mint, which is based on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is based on another distro called Debian. Here you can see how some distros are built upon others. Debian itself is what's called a root distro, meaning it is independent and was built from scratch and not built from anything else. But hundreds of distros are based on it. Each distro has their own community, forums, chat sites, etc. There's a lot more to cover on distros, but that's something I'll cover in another video. So just like desktop environments, distros are a matter of personal preference. I encourage you to try out several distros and see what you prefer. This is commonly known as distro hopping. You can even install multiple distros on your computer at the same time and choose which one you want to load when your computer boots up. This is called dual booting or multi-booting, and you can also even keep Windows as well. I made a video on this, so check the link in the description or click the link on the screen for information on how this works and how to do it. As for software and gaming, there are plenty of applications to choose from, and they're all free. All the basics you need to run a desktop are available. You have file managers, which have all the same basic functions of Windows Explorer or Mac's Finder, and they can also access USB sticks or other partitions on your computer, even if they're formatted for use in Windows. You have the familiar home directory with the usual documents, downloads, and so on, but if you venture outside of that and browse the drive, you'll find it very different from Windows. But if you're interested in that, check out my video on Linux directories explained. There are lots of media players which support almost all video and audio formats, and you can even install Spotify. You also have common web browsers such as Firefox, Chrome, Brave, Opera, and you can even run the new Microsoft Edge browser, which is currently available as a preview build for Linux. There is also a way to run an older version of Internet Explorer if you really need it. Unfortunately, Windows or Mac software doesn't run out of the box, but you can use something called Wine to install Windows software like Microsoft Office. Of course, not everything runs perfectly using Wine, but Linux has alternatives for almost anything. Instead of Microsoft Office, for example, you can use LibreOffice or OnlyOffice. These are free applications that can open, edit, and save documents, spreadsheets, and presentations in the Microsoft Office file format. Steam has a native Linux client, and their library has plenty of games that natively support Linux. Just look for this icon. And even if games are available natively for Linux, Steam has been developing software called Proton, which allows you to play the Windows versions of games in Linux. More and more titles are supported every day, allowing more games to run in Linux. Software is easy to install in Linux. It's organized in what's called packages. So Steam or LibreOffice are packages, and so is pretty much every component of the operating system. A package is a collection of file and applications. In almost every distro, you have a package manager. This is like an app store that you would find in Windows or on a Mac. Pretty much all the software you'll need is available here, and it's the best and easiest way to install and uninstall things. It's also where you'll get updates for software and security. There's very rarely any need to go to any website to download and install anything in Linux. I made a video on installing software in Linux for multiple package managers, so check the link in the description or click the link on the screen. So what about drivers for your hardware? Well, the good news is that almost all hardware is supported out of the box without a need to install any drivers. The kernel and its modules take care of all of that for you. The most common devices that require drivers to be installed are NVIDIA graphics cards, and that's because NVIDIA does not release their code for Linux developers to work with. Most distros like Ubuntu and Mint have easy ways to load the proprietary drivers if you really need that extra performance. But out of the box, the open source Nouveau drivers will work pretty well for most cards and games. If you're using a different distro that doesn't have a built-in proprietary driver installer, they usually have a wiki or some kind of instruction that will tell you step by step how to set up the proprietary drivers. Another thing I'll mention while talking about hardware is it runs great on old hardware because it uses less resources and less memory. So if you have an old laptop or desktop kicking around that is just starting to get slow and Windows is just chugging along on it, you can just format it, install Linux on it, and I guarantee you it'll run a lot better. So what about security and viruses? Well, one thing you'll notice is that people who run Linux don't run antivirus software, and there's a few reasons for that. Linux is built secure from the ground up. Your regular user account can't do much to damage the system, so any software that does get into your system can't do much. In order to access system files or install or uninstall software, your system will prompt you for your root password. The root password is what you set when you first install Linux. This password is what gives a running process elevated permissions to do things. Without it, you can't do a whole lot. Linux is also very compartmentalized, so processes only have limited permissions unless you specifically grant them. Even downloading an executable program from a shady website doesn't mean it can do anything unless you've given that file permission to be executed. This is where using the package manager or software center gives you yet another advantage of knowing that whatever software you're downloading is safe and secure. All these reasons that I mentioned are why viruses are almost non-existent for Linux. Trying to make a working virus to attack Linux is much too hard and is usually pointless. You will, however, see antivirus software that can run in Linux, but this is usually made for people who are running file or mail servers that will be accessed by Windows machines, and are intended to protect the Windows machines that are accessing those files, and not really required to protect the server itself. So why doesn't everyone use Linux if it's so great? Well, some people don't like change. Others need specific software that is only available in certain operating systems. And some people just find Linux to be overwhelming and complicated. We've all seen the movies where someone is hacking away on a supposed Linux machine that's spewing out all this code in multiple windows and someone's typing away furiously. Well, you can set up something like this if you want to, but the reality is that Linux has come a long way in recent years. It's really quite easy to install, set up, and use. Everything is all graphical menus and easy to navigate. Back in the 90s when I installed Linux, it was not so easy and needed a lot of manual work to get it up and running, but that's all changed. Perhaps it would surprise some to know that Linux is actually all around them, and they use devices that run Linux every day. Things like your internet router, printer, smart TV, smartwatch, Amazon and Roku devices, your car's infotainment system and navigation, and even your Android phones and tablets, since Android is based on Linux. It's also used in air traffic controllers, the Large Hadron Collider, and by big corporations like Lockheed Martin, NASA, and the Department of National Defense. It also powers many supercomputers and website servers around the world. As I mentioned earlier, the best way to try out Linux on a Windows or Mac computer is to use virtual machine software such as VirtualBox or VMware. Then it's just a matter of downloading some ISO files and loading them into your VM. An ISO file is simply a file which is an image of a disk and can be loaded as a CD or DVD in a virtual machine to simulate loading a disk into a real machine. These ISO files are what you'll get from any Linux website when you're downloading a distro. Another alternative is you can use a program like Rufus in Windows to write an ISO file to a USB stick. Then you can boot off of the USB stick to try the live version on your hardware without installing it, and you can see if you like it while ensuring that it will run on whatever hardware you're using. Doing it this way will also give you a better idea of how it will perform on your hardware as opposed to running it through a virtual machine. So if you're curious about Linux, I hope you give it a try, give it a chance, and I hope you found this video useful. I have plenty of Linux videos on my channel which cover lots of different distros out there, as well as a lot of how-tos on how to do things in Linux. So check them out and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until
Because I've had
Most people who have
cataract
used
surgery.
Linux have seen the root directory, but not everybody understands what the directories are used for. To a Windows user, opening the file manager looks very much like opening the home folder in Windows, and all looks very familiar. You've got your documents, your downloads, your pictures, your videos. Same thing. That is until they explore up the tree looking for the C drive. Where's program files? Where's the directory that Linux is installed into? How do you find anything? Let me explain. I'll take a quick minute here for new Linux users coming from Windows. Windows and Linux evolved in very different ways. Once upon a time, there was a thing called MS-DOS, the disk operating system. It was command line only, but you could still run programs, games, and WordPerfect, but you didn't need Windows. Windows was added to PCs, and you could install it on top of DOS. You would start up your computer and type in Win to start Windows. It used letters to assign drives, with A and B being removable disks, since early PCs only had floppy drives. With the addition of hard drives, the letter C became the letter for your internal disk. Additional disks were given the next available letter. You could install things in DOS wherever you wanted to. Windows installed itself in its own directory called, funny enough, Windows. Later, Microsoft changed how it booted by evolving their kernel to be less and less dependent on DOS and eventually allowed Windows to boot directly without DOS at all. Microsoft's file directory structure kind of stayed the same. Now Linux is different, and so is its file structure. It also doesn't install applications like Windows does. Starting with Windows 95, Microsoft created the Program Files directory, which was the default installation directory for most applications. For the most part, Linux follows Unix traditions, which is why it uses the / instead of the / like Windows. Linux also cares about capitalization, so you can have things like this: file, 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 file. As you can see, while they're all named file, they all use different capitalization, so Linux will allow this because they're technically not named exactly the same. Mac users who have explored their hard drives might find Linux a little more familiar. This is because Macs also evolved from a Unix ancestor, more specifically BSD. So let's have a look at the root and go over how all this works. This layout, for the most part, is outlined in the File System Hierarchy Standard, or FHS, which defines the structure and layout and is maintained by the Linux Foundation. I want to note here that not all distributions follow this. Some do their own special thing. Also, several ways of structuring the folders has changed over the years, but most of what follows still applies in most cases. So let's go end to end, starting with bin. Bin being short for binaries. These are the most basic binaries, which is another word for programs or applications. Things like ls to list your directory, cat to display the output of a file, and other basic functions are stored here. Skipping ahead a little bit, I also want to point out sbin. These are system binaries that a system administrator would use and that a standard user wouldn't have access to without permission. Both of these folders contain the files that need to be accessible when running in single user mode, as opposed to the usual multi-user mode. Single user mode is a special mode that boots you in as a root user to allow you to do system repairs and upgrades or testing. Networking is usually disabled in this mode because of security issues. When you install a program in Linux, it's typically not placed in these folders. Next is boot. This is a folder you don't want to play around in. It contains everything your OS needs to boot. In other words, your bootloaders live here. Next, we have CD-ROM, which I'm going to skip because it's not in all distros and it's more of a legacy mounting point for your CD-ROM. So let's move on to dev. This is where your devices live. Linux, again following Unix, has a standard where it was decided everything is a file. Here you'll find your hardware. A disk, for example, would be dev/SDA. Here. And a partition on that disk would be, for example, dev SDA1, SDA2, and so on. You can also find everything else here from your webcam to your keyboard. This is typically an area that applications and drivers will access and is rarely something a user should be dabbling in. So going back to root, the next folder is etc. The name of this folder has been argued as standing for etc., edit to configure, as well as others. But it has been confirmed by Dennis Ritchie that it did indeed mean etc. This folder is where all your configurations are stored. However, when I'm talking about configurations, I'm talking about for things that are system-wide, such as apt. In this folder, for example, you would find the list of all your sources, what repos your system connects to, as well as its various settings. So if you're looking for something that is a system-wide application and not a per-user setting, for example, LibreOffice would have settings in each user's folder, and it wouldn't be system-wide because each user can have different settings. And this brings me to the next folder, which is Home. However, I'm going to save this for the end because there's some things I want to discuss about it, so we'll come back to it later. Next are the lib folders. This includes lib, lib32, and lib64. These are where the libraries are stored. Libraries are files that applications can use to perform various functions. They're required by the binaries in bin and sbin, for example. Moving on, we have media and mnt, or mount. These directories are where you would find your other mounted drives. It can be a floppy disk, USB stick, external hard drive, network drive, or even a second hard drive. So if you're looking for that A, B, or D drive, this is where you want to be looking. Now, this media folder wasn't always around. It was typically just MNT, and that's where you mounted your storage devices. Nowadays, most distros automatically mount devices for you in the media directory. So your USB stick that you inserted would be in media, username, device name. So why are there two directories? Well, if you're mounting things manually, use the MNT directory and leave the media directory to the OS to manage. Most distros and file managers, such as Nautilus, for example, what I'm using here, and Dolphin and PCMan FM, will have something on the side here. For example, in Nautilus, I can click other locations, and here I can access my other devices. If I had a USB stick plugged in right now, it would show up here, and I could simply click on it and access it. Next down the line is OPT. This is the optional folder, which is usually where manually installed software from vendors resides. Although some software packages found in the repo can also find their way here. VirtualBox Guest Editions is one example. So here, for example, is a VPN software that I installed and the drivers for my Brother printer/scanner. This is also where you can install software you've created yourself. This folder is where I place all the applications I've written for Scion Linux. Next, we have proc. Proc is where you'll find pseudo files that contain information about system processes and resources. For example, every process will have a directory here which contains all kinds of information on that process. An example I can show you here, if I open the system monitor, I can see Deja Dupe Monitor's process ID, or PID, is 2344. So if I navigate to proc2344, which is the PID for the Deja Dupe monitor, I can see all kinds of pseudo files here. This is much like dev, where they're not actually files on the system. This is the kernel translating other information to appear as files. So for example, here I can open the status file and it'll show me all kinds of information on that process. There's tons more in here, but this isn't something you want to play in. If you are a developer, if you're writing applications, this is very handy. Here you can also find information like for the CPU, for example. This will give you all kinds of information on the CPU, and you can also do uptime, which will print out your uptime for your system. Next is root. Root is the root user's home folder. Unlike a user's home folder, it does not contain the typical directories inside, and it does not reside in the home directory. You can store files here if you wish, but you need root permissions to access it. The location of this directory also ensures that root always has access to its home folder in case you have the regular user's home directory stored on another drive, which you cannot access. Next is run. This one's fairly new, and different distros use it in slightly different ways. It's a tempfs file system, which means it runs in RAM. This also means that everything in it is gone when the system's rebooted or shut down. It's used for processes that start early in the boot procedure to store runtime information that they use to function. We've already covered sbin, so next down the line is snap. This is a folder where snap packages are stored and are mainly used by Ubuntu. Snap packages are completely self-contained applications that run differently than regular packages and applications. This will be covered in a future video on its own since it'll take more time to explain. SRV. This is the service directory where service data is stored. It'll probably be empty for you, but if you run a server such as a web server or FTP server, you would store the files that will be accessed by external users here. This allows for better security since it's at the root of the drive, and it also allows you to easily mount this folder from another hard drive. Next down the line is sys. The system folder has been around a long time. It's a way to interact with the kernel. One older example is writing to a file using VGA switcheroo and change settings on graphic cards in a hybrid system. This directory is similar to the run directory and is not physically written to the disk. It's created every time the system boots up. so you wouldn't store anything here and nothing gets installed here. TMP is, of course, a temp or temporary directory. This is where files are temporarily stored by applications that could be used during a session. One example is if you're writing a document in a word processor. It will regularly save a temporary copy of what you're writing here so that if the application crashes, it can look here to see if there's a recent saved copy that you can recover. This folder is usually emptied when you reboot the system. On occasion, you might find some files or directory that remain and could be stuck there because the system can't delete them. This normally isn't a big deal unless there's hundreds of files or the files are taking a lot of disk space, in which case you might want to log in as the root user in single user mode, navigate to this folder, and manually delete them. Moving on, we have the USR folder. This is the user application space where applications will be installed that are used by the user, as opposed to the bin directories used by the system and system administrator to perform maintenance. It's also known as Unix System Resource, and any applications installed here are considered non-essential for basic system operation. Installed applications will reside in one of several places here, such as user bin, user sbin, or local bin, local sbin, with their required library stored in user local lib or user lib. Most programs that are installed from source code will end up in the local folders. Many larger programs will install themselves into user share. Any installed source code, such as the kernel source and header files, will go into the src directory. This directory seems like a confusing mess at first, and while the directory structure and what goes where is laid out in the FHS I mentioned earlier, you'll still have to sometimes look in other places to find things. Someone making a certain application might not adhere to the standard and could just do what they want. Also, some distros may treat these folders differently as well. Going back to root, we have next var. var is the variable directory. It contains files and directories that are expected to grow in size. For example, var crash holds information about processes that have crashed. Var log contains log files for both the system and many different applications, which will constantly grow in size as you use the system. You'll also find other things in here like databases for mail and temporary storage for printer queues, also known as the spool. And finally, we will come back to the home folder. When you enter the home folder, you'll see that each user has its own folder inside of it. The home folder is where you store your personal files and documents. Like I said, each user has their own home folder, and each user can only access their own unless they use admin permissions. Some users mount the home folder on a different drive or different partition, which allows you to reinstall your system and preserve your files. The home folder also contains many different directories which store your application settings. A hidden directory is simply one that starts with a period. Linux hides these by default. You can view them in the file manager by selecting Show Hidden Files or by pressing Ctrl-H. This is of course using Nautilus in GNOME, and some file managers might be different. PCManFM is also press Ctrl-H to view hidden files. If you're in the terminal and you list files, it'll only show you what is not hidden unless you specify -A for all. And now you can see all your hidden files. These hidden directories store things like cache that some applications, like a browser, use to store temporary files. Other applications might store thumbnails or information that will be used over and over repeatedly. Then you have folders like config and local, which store individual application settings. Genie, for example, can be found in config. So here's the Genie folder. Any settings that I change in the Genie options are saved here. If I go back to the home folder, you can see that some applications store their settings straight into the home folder, like GIMP, for example. These hidden folders are also where your desktop settings are saved. Whether you use OpenBox, KDE, GNOME, Unity, they all save their settings here, such as what wallpaper you use, what theme you use, and so on. You could even place your icons and themes in these folders so that you can have a custom look and easily save them for reuse. These hidden folders are important if you want to back up your files and your settings. I covered backups, how to do them, and where to store them in another video, which I'll link in the corner of the screen and in the description below. If you don't customize your system or you don't care to, then you can simply back up all the folders you see here. But if you want to save all your settings, then you might want to include all the hidden files as well. So if you reinstall your system, you simply log in and all your theming will already be done just like you left it. You will have to reinstall your applications, but once you install them, the settings you set for them will already be in place and the applications will run just like they did before. So as you can see, Linux is kind of similar to Mac, but very different from Windows. Although it seems like a mess, it's actually a more efficient way of doing things and allows much more sharing of common resources between packages. When it comes to adding and removing software, your distro will have a package manager that will handle all this for you. The package manager tracks where everything is going so that when you remove your package, it takes all those files with it. I hope you found this informative. I did put quite a bit of work into preparing it, and I'll have quite a bit of editing to do now. So if you liked the video, please click like, and don't forget to subscribe by hitting that big red button and the bell to get notified of new videos. Most importantly, if you found it useful, please share it by clicking that share button and spread it out to your Twitter, Facebook, or whatever platform you use. As always, you can also follow me over on Twitter at Dorian.slash and swing by my Patreon page as well. All the links are in the description.
Okay. Any comment?
Very interesting.
There were things in there I did not know, and I've been using Linux for a while.
Yeah, well, in the two videos so far, they brought up about various things that are derived from the Linux world. And one of them they did mention, in part, it has to do with Chrome OS on Chromebooks. But there's also, I got an interesting article that gives more information. So let's get rid of that one. Now, this one here, this is a 25-minute one. So I'm only going to show you part of it. You'll have to use the link to be able to view it all.
Greetings and salutations. Thanks for clicking on the video. Today we're going to talk about the Linux file system. This is not a comprehensive video, and hopefully it will not be very technical. This is just for anybody who is curious about what is different with the Linux Unix file system compared to like what you might be used to working with in Windows or Macintosh or other devices. And it does have its idiosyncrasies, mainly because of the fact that the Linux file system comes from Unix, and Unix is the granddaddy of all operating systems, which was originally designed for computers that lived in, that filled up a whole room and had hundreds of users attached to them and all sorts of different storage all over the place and tape drives and things like that. So we're using this system today on our little laptops and our little desktops that have maybe 1 or 2 hard drives in them, but we still get all the functionality for these big gargantuan systems of years ago. And the first thing that I guess we need to do is clear up just a little bit of confusion. We need to define the word file system in the sense that we're talking about it today, because there are 2 meanings to that word. File system can refer to the format that you put on a hard drive, the way the hard drive itself actually stores files. And you'll hear people say, well, I had to format the hard drive and install a new file system. In Windows, there are file systems like FAT32 and NTFS. In Linux, there are a number of file systems. The de facto is ext4, but there's ext3 and ext2 and JFS and XFS and ButterFS and many more to choose from. The average user, though, really doesn't care about what file system is being used on their hard drive as long as it works. And ext4 is one of the most stable and best in the world, so it's a good de facto choice. Today, what we're talking about is a file system in the sense of how an individual computer organizes data, where it stores it, and how it keeps up with where it is. So we're looking at a diagram here of a basic file system for a Linux machine and all of the different folders or directories that appear. If you're working at a command line, we call them directories, because a directory is actually a file that holds a bunch of addresses for other files. In computer science class, they compared those to file folders that held more files. That was the common way it was taught. So therefore, when GUIs came along, the graphic user environments with file managers, directories were represented by file folders, so today we actually call them folders. They're interchangeable. All right, so now that we have our nomenclature all figured out, let's get into this. Oh, we have another one here that's a dual meaning to talk about, and that is the root of the file system. Not to be confused with the root user, who is the one person on a Linux or Unix system who has complete control over the system, okay? In this case, we're talking about the root of the file system, the base, the start, the top, the beginning, and it is represented by a single slash. Now, under here, you'll see all of these different directories and folders and all this other stuff, and the entire computer is in here, because in Linux and Unix, everything is represented by a file or a folder. Every device on your computer is represented by a file or a folder. Your hard drives, your display, your keyboard, your everything is actually represented by a file or a folder. Also, you can have numerous hard drives hooked up to a Linux computer, and you're going to notice immediately there are no A's, B's, C's, and D's. In Windows, you can have more than one partition on one physical drive, and that will be put as different drives on the machine, A, B, C, D, whatever. In Linux and Unix, what you do is you mount that hard drive in a folder somewhere, an empty folder, so it could appear anywhere in the file system, and you could have as many hard drives as you wanted. You can also take network shares and mount them to the file system in different folders, and that way you don't care where the data is coming from. All you care is that you have access to it. That's called obfuscation, and it makes sense when you have very complex systems. So let's actually take a look at some of the folders that you will find on your computer, and to do that I'm going to open up a actual file manager here. In this case, since we're using Ubuntu, it's called Files, or Nautilus is the actual name of the program that does this. And we're in our home folder, and we see our typical folders, and you see that I've created some more folders in here. And if you want to see all of the files that are on the system, in Ubuntu you have an entry down here. It says computer, and now it lets me see pretty much the same thing that we're seeing here.
Okay, I'm stopping this one here because of the length of it. So it goes into a little bit more depth, similar to the prior one, but slightly different approach. I want to mention here the var. If you ever use virtual machines on your computer, like VirtualBox, or there's another one for Linux specific, the virtual machines are stored in the var folder. I found that out months and months ago. So I'm going to stop this one here and go to the next and last video. This is interesting too, but I'll play this one all the way.
What's up everybody, it's Travis here from Travis.media. So piggybacking on the Linux file system video that I put out last week, to be a competent Linux user, among other things, you also really need to understand file permissions. This was another area that I struggled in as a new developer on my first Linux system trying to sudo everything. So in this video, I'm going to teach it to you in 5 minutes. And when you're done, I have a free cheat sheet for you below in the description that you can print out and hang by your desk. Let's get started. Every file and directory in your Linux system will have 3 permission groups. There's owner, which are permissions for who owns this file or directory, group, permissions that apply to the group assigned to the file or directory, and others, permissions that all the other users have. And you'll have to be diligent to protect this one. So if you're the owner, you get certain permissions. If you're the assigned group, you get certain permissions, and then everyone else gets permissions. Now I hate theory only, so let's open up an Ubuntu Linux terminal and run an ls with the L flag, which gives us more detail. And we see a directory named files and 2 files, main.py and myconfig.yaml. But we have all this other gibberish here that we usually gloss over. Well, don't. This info is very important for a secure system. So again, we have 3 types of permission groups: owner, group, and others. And each permission group gets 3 permissions: read, write, and execute. They can read the contents, write or modify the contents, or execute a file, or in the case of the directory, list the files in it. So in our example of the files directory above, we can see this. This gibberish here, drwx rwx r-x, means something. And we can break it down here. First, we have this D. That D simply stands for directory. If there's a dash here, it's a file. Next, we have rwx. This is for the owner. What can the owner do on this directory? Well, the owner, Ubuntu, as you'll see the first name here, can read, write, and execute on this directory. Then you have another set, which is also rwx, which corresponds to the group. Anyone in this group has these permissions: read, write, and execute on this directory. So the first name here is going to be the owner. The second name is going to be the group. And anyone in the Ubuntu group can read, write, and execute on this directory. And finally, what can all other users do? Well, they can read and execute only. They can't write. So when you're not given a privilege, you get this dash. So we get r-x. Read, can't write, but you can execute. Now let's look at an actual file instead of a directory. This is a bit trickier. So here in our gibberish, we can actually break it down to dash, rw dash, rw dash, r dash dash. So the dash means it's a file, not a directory. For our owner permissions, we get rw dash, meaning the owner can read, write, but not execute. For our group, we get the same thing: read, write, can't execute. And for all the other users, they can only read this file. So now that you know the permissions, how do you change them? Well, you have one of two commands. The first one we'll look at is chown. Some people say chown, but it means changing owner. So if we look back at our example, let's say we want to change the owner to Travis, which is another user on this Linux machine. And maybe we want to change the group to Travis Media. To change the owner, we just run chown, this command, with the new owner, Travis, in the file name or directory we want to apply this to. So if I go back to my terminal, I need to start out with sudo, and then the command chown, and then I want to change the owner to Travis, and then the file name, which is myconfig.yaml. And if I do an lsl again, you'll see I have a new owner for that file, Travis. And if I want to change the owner and the group, I can simply do Travis : whatever the group name is, Travis Media. So we can run that again, but this time instead of Travis, we'll do : Travis Media. This updates the group as well. So lsl. And you see here that I have the user of Travis and the group of Travis Media now. Now the other command you need to know is chmod, which stands for change mode. But in order to understand this, we got to look at the Linux numbering system. Now the way they do this is binary, but most of us understand it like this. A read gets 4, a write gets 2, and an execute gets 1. Now what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at our file permission here. If we go by that scoring system, then an RW would get 4 and 2, which is a 6 for the owner. The group also gets a 6, and everyone else gets a 4, because they just have read privileges. So this file permission is a 664. Now in order to change this to something else, like let's say we want to add the execute privilege for the owner and group, we simply run chmod, the number we want it to be, and then the file name. So chmod 774 file name. Let's try it. So this main.py, let's do sudo chmod, and we want to change it to 774, and then the file name, main.py. Run this. And now you see we have rwx, because we added the execute for the owner. We have rwx, which adds the execute for the group, and then the read stays the same. And in our example of a directory, we have rwx, which is going to be 7, rwx, which is going to be 7 also, and then rx, which is 4 plus 1 is 5. So this is a 775. Now let's say we want to remove the need to execute. We can run chmod 664 file name. And here are some common permissions. A baseline for your files should be 644. And a directory baseline can be 755, meaning the owner can read, write, and execute, and anyone in the group and everyone else can read and execute only. The reason why you want them to execute is to be able to list the files in that directory. And then finally, a key pair, like on AWS when you create an EC2 instance, you want to lock down this key pair to a 400, which means the owner can only read and no one else can read, write, or execute. So take a few minutes to look around your file system, like cd, etc. You'll notice that most files have the owner and group as root, which is good. You want them to be protected and only available for a super user. But be sure to plan your own created files and directories accordingly and safely. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, consider doing so, and I'll see you in the next video.
Comments?
Very,
What?
very interesting.
Well, these have all been out there. All I did was I got information of one of the videos from Sanford. He stumbled across it. And I found the others by just looking at the side panel of other topics
Yeah.
that might be related. Another article that I've got here is 6 uses for a Linux home server. This might be of interest to some people. I may want to look at doing this. Perhaps you, Peter, would also. I don't know about you, Bob, but generally speaking, it's gets into repurposing an old PC, share files efficiently between multiple computers, set up a home media server with Linux. That would apply to Sanford and his extensive photograph library as well as his video library. Block nasties across your home network. Keep control of your data. Get hands-on IT experience with a home server. I don't think any of us are planning on the latter, but perhaps Peter might be interested in that in the school situation. So it goes into some brief discussion about each of these categories. And trust me, you'll have to do some of your own homework. Pi-hole is a security device made by a Raspberry Pi. And it helps block things. It almost acts like a honeypot, if you're familiar with the term. Keep your control on your data, get hands-on IT experience. These are some of the basics. It's not an in-depth article. So, but I thought it might be of interest. System 76 unveils new Lemur Pro Linux laptop with Intel Core Ultra processors. This is their one of their newest processors that contains an NPU. And you're seeing more and more, I'm not certain that they would be manufacturers. They're more like custom-built systems, but they are getting to the point where they're probably having others build some of these systems for them. And so I only bring it up as the fact that Linux hardware machines, computers specific to Linux, are getting more and more common. Next, I have here KDE Gear. I guess that's a distro. 24.02.1 improves Dolphin's Spectacle, Ocular, and other KDE apps, including down here markup, K management, K wallet manager, K torrent, K organizer, K mail, conversation, and many have received bug fixes from prior releases. So this is again a distro. A lot of people like KDE. I liked it originally, but back when I first looked at KDE, our hardware left a lot to be desired in horsepower. KDE and GNOME 4 series are the top of the line resource hogs and require the most power because they are the largest distros. Whereas like Mint and Ubuntu are probably rated mostly as medium base, but you got KUbuntu, which would be KDE, and that could get very large and require more resources than, say, plain Ubuntu. So it's something to take into account. 5 reasons why you should, why Linux desktop is finally growing in popularity. This one I really did like. For years now, the most popular end user operating worldwide has been Linux, or to be more precise, it's Android. According to the Irish analysis site Star Counter, most recent numbers, Android had 43.74% of the market in February 2024, followed by Windows with 27.39% on the desktop, as it's been for decades. Windows is still the champ. Recently, though, desktop Linux has crawled up to 4.03%. Coming down to the next paragraph, if you count Chrome OS as Linux, which I do, with its 2.26% market share, Linux is even more popular. Mind you, modern Chromebooks, Chrome OS owes more to the open source real-time operating system Zephyr than it does Linux itself. And I'll let you read the rest of the article. It's not that deep, so it's a quick read. But I got curious about Zephyr, and there are quite a few things out there about Zephyr. An RTOS is real-time operating system. That means you get extremely quick responses compared to the average OS that you might be running on your system. How many of us need an RTS? That depends on what we're doing with our individual computers. Certain applications may require an RTOS, and Zephyr sounds like it is available and can be used as it specifies over here on the side panel. It's on GitHub, and it gives you the exact address of the repository. It's available in English. I don't know what other languages offhand. And it uses Apache 2 licensing. So if you're interested, there's something to take a look at. Next is, now this one, remember, it's going to come up again. DXVK 2.3.1 brings more efficient shader code generation to NVIDIA GPUs. This by itself normally would apply mostly to gamers. But because of AI, we are getting into more 3D type stuff. This includes Peter with his 3D printers. So this has application. Next is top 5 distros to try the KDE Plasma 6 desktop right now, in case you happen to be interested. KDE Neon, which I think is what, God, I forgot his name now. Sorry about that, but one of the people who hasn't been around for a while. OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, I do use that, but I haven't used KDE on it. KAOS, Tuxedo OS, which I hadn't heard of before, and this one I haven't heard of either. Cache OS. So that's something to look at. Now, I have seen this on at least one of my distros. The Linux kernel 6.8 offers some exciting new features and fixes overall. However, the default for like Mint is still a 5-level kernel. I did try out 6.8, but it expires support in August. So it's not something you want to do other than just to take a look at it. And you may have headaches getting it uninstalled and getting back to the normal 5 series kernel. So do at your own risk. But I have looked at it. I found it to be just fine for my general testing for about a month. So it's coming. It's just going to take a while before that becomes pretty standard. NVIDIA 550.67 graphic drivers brings Wayland fixes, better support for VKD 3D games. And this is where you get into things like Apple's visor and other competitors' visors. And you'll see more and more of those. You got 3D printing, stuff like that, and you have to be able to visualize it. Well, here's where they start tying it together. Now, in addition, Digicam, which I vaguely remember hearing about, but I have never looked into, but it automatically tags images using deep learning neural network. In other words, a subsection of AI. And if you're really into photos, one of the headaches you got is labeling all your videos and photos so that you know where they were taken, maybe who's in it. Well, this will start you off by automatically doing some of that same information. So it's something, if you're really into photos and videos to some extent, that has to be looked into. Next, 5 Linux commands every new user should learn. And several of these look familiar in Windows if you get into the command terminal. Now, as an example, ls in Windows, dir. Same kind of ideology. You have different switches that are available to give you different looks of your directories and what's in them, folders and files, etc. And whether if you want to reveal hidden files and stuff like that. You can do that also in Windows. CD, common to Windows. RM, also available in Windows, but we usually use DEL in Windows. So it's one of those things. CP, we spell it out as COPY, to copy a file from one location to another or to another device. MV, we call it move, MOVE, to move a file or directory to another location or device. And when it's done being moved, i.e. copied, it then deletes the original so that you're making space. So if I have a file or a directory on C drive and I want to move it to a thumb drive, I can do a move of the directory on C to a device of the thumb drive. And when it's done copying it all over, it goes back to the drive C and gets rid of the file or directory. And that makes new space available on C so that you're not overcrowding C, which can be a big problem in Windows. So give that some thought. another one. 76 refreshes its Adder workstation Linux laptop with the HX class 14th generation Intel CPU, which is also got probably the NPU processor built into it. So this is another device that might be of interest to some people. Now I'm going to take a small break here. And is there any comments or questions so far?
So when you're done with the normal presentations, I've got a couple of questions and some issues I want to bring up.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Now I'm gonna do the next part, which is the AI. A lot of the AI clients, as an example, Copilot, it's built into Edge. If you're on Linux, like I am, I have Edge installed. Therefore, if I were to bring up Edge right now, it has direct access to Copilot. Well, there's also, you can create tabs. And this will work in any of them, any browser, because it's cross-platform. You can open up a tab, and I've got Gemini here. I've got another one called Claude. And believe it or not, I got Copilot. Now, for each of these, the easiest way of doing it, Copilot, you put in copilot.microsoft.com. For Claude, which I find very good also when I'm doing troubleshooting besides Copilot on Precise, is Claude.ai. And the other one is Gemini. You type in gemini.google.com. This Gemini replaces the former Bard that came out last summer. And it's supposed to be even better than Bard was. And I've used Bard before also. So I've used all three of these, including in troubleshooting problems on the computers. And don't remind me of that, because I've already gotten, oh, son of a gun. I didn't spot that. And he's probably gone. Yeah. No. Oh, Bob. Sorry, I didn't see your sitting there. The best thing I can suggest is stay on, and I'll be giving out the document, and you can watch the video once I get it posted. But since I am in a handicap mode right now, I didn't hear a tone that told me somebody was waiting to get in. And I'm mostly looking at my Linux system. Sorry about that. But generally speaking, with Copilot, I come down here. Creative is for somebody who's like creating a child's story or creating something else that you don't care if it hallucinates or not. Balanced is what probably a lot of people will use, and it may contain more hallucination than you want. But the other is Precise, and most of the time I'm using Precise. I want as accurate an answer as possible with the least amount of hallucination possible. And it is the wave of the future for troubleshooting your computers. So I do recommend that you do that. And what I'm going to do is I'll put in chat the URLs of these, especially for whoops, sorry. Oh, you're not going to let me chat, huh? There it is. Okay. And hang on a minute here, and I'll get all the URLs in one shot. So as you can see, I'm in Firefox on Linux, and I've got access to all of these chat AIs, and I can use any of them to get me whatever I want. Now, I'm also going to put out there the articles list. So let's see. Okay, out there now you should be able to see the URLs for the AI clients, the articles list. There's some very good videos in there, especially if you got newbies to Linux. Though one of them is duplicated, the first one. I was for Bob Baxter's benefit. There was difficulties running the meeting. As you know, even Huey Poplock has had extreme problems of late, and I think a lot of this has.
Timer 20 minutes.
Pardon? Oh, I got somebody in the background. Okay. So this is a case where I had trouble and I had to try something a little bit different, but it has to do, I'm pretty sure, with either background apps running that are stealing the use of the webcam camera and microphone on 11. And 11 and 10 have one big difference. In 10, it's easy to go into settings, privacy, and turn off all the background apps. In 11, you don't have that option. You have to go through installed apps, go through every last one of them to find out what ones are running in the background, and you can stop them if you want to. So I give you that little carrot. Peter.
Tim,
No.
The link that you sent, or the name of the link that you sent, was February
For which?
for the articles. And if I download it, it will overwrite February's list.
Wait a minute.
It should be March.
Yeah, it is labeled February, but it is March's stuff.
Yeah, but if I download it directly right now, it wants to overwrite the February I already have.
All you got to do is change the label from February to March, because it is March article.
Before downloading, change your February to something else. Give it a little addendum.
All right. Anyway, generally speaking, this is most of my presentation. I did rush it a little bit. I could have probably done the videos a little bit longer, but I think it would be overkill since one of them takes 25 minutes or 26 minutes. But generally speaking, the front end of this is for newbies. The back end is for more advanced users. Like I mentioned before Bob finally got in, is that there's more and more people interested in using the Linux operating systems, and there's a new way of looking at it. There's one article on that, and there is reference in that article to Zephyr, and the next tab is on Zephyr. It's just a one brief article about Zephyr and where you can get it from. And it's a real-time operating system. Not everybody would need a real-time operating system, but especially people in engineering, science, maybe certain medical areas of research. And there's other areas where you need a real-time, quick response operating system that most of us wouldn't know what to do with. Also, how to set up a home server, which you guys are ahead of, Bob Baxter's way ahead of us in his group. So it's something to give you some food for thought. I'm hoping some of you guys have some ideas come next month. And you can let me know ahead of time that way maybe I can do a little research and include it in the meeting material. Okay, now I'm going to stop here and we'll open it up for general Q&A and problems. And Peter's going and losing his control over wanting to have a couple items.
Okay, so first I want to tell you my audience. My audience is from 7th grade to high school. Okay, that's my user group. Okay, so what I've got is I've got 3 i3 Inspiron Dell PCs that I'm saving from the recycler. They currently have the school's version of 22H2 Windows 10 Pro locked in. I don't want to lose that capability. I found out that I can actually go through the Dell F9, F10 and get into factory restore, reset it, clean everything out from the school, and get a base copy of the operating system. The OSs are locked on the motherboard, the license. Dell put them on there. So I don't have to worry about license keys. Now, my question is I want to use these as a laboratory for getting some of the kids started in Linux. So the question being, do I want to do a true dual boot, which I haven't done in probably 10 years right now? And I only did Windows 7, Windows 10 dual boots on a laptop.
I don't recommend that.
So my second query was, do I get a second hard drive and drop it in the machine and put Linux on that machine, and then if they need to go back to Windows, just change the plugs over?
That would be the better choice. Having it on a separate drive eliminates if certain things occur on the Windows base it makes it impossible to launch the Linux until you do a recovery operation that brings up the grub menu again so that you can launch Linux or Windows.
Okay, that's
And you'll get the grub menu. The grub menu might get wiped out, mind you, but there's other ways, even in Windows systems, to be able to access a second physical drive. And I have to look that up myself, Matt, because normally what I do, and probably Bob does a lot, this is an external drive. It can be solid state or spinning. It don't matter. Plug it into a USB port. Then you, depending on how the machine is set, it may detect this device and automatically boot up from that, or you have to know the machine's boot menu to go into that and launch it from there. But you're going to run into some problems with some distros of Linux in that you're going to be taking and having problems between a Windows environment on the machine that wants secure boot, that wants really to have total, absolute control of just running Windows on the machine. Whether your machines at the school can have a drop out of secure boot, but leave the rest intact, you're going to have difficulties. And with certain distros, you got to go further than that in changing settings in the BIOS so that Windows will keep running, but Linux will also. But the Windows is less secure, theoretically, because of the fact that you don't have secure boot running. And this was a Microsoft deliberate thing, probably because of the increasing growth of Linux, but it also is affecting people like developers who are using Windows WSL platform with or without a GUI. And so you have to take that into account as well. So there is no simplistic answer I can give you on that. If I were more into it, another way of doing it would be take the article about a home server. You could load Linux operating system on there. You don't execute it from there. Instead, you connect to the server through network booting, and you would load from the home server on each machine the Linux. But I don't know if you'll run into problems with secure boot and other things like that. I think.
okay. So these are outside of the school environment. Okay, because they're so locked down because of the different ages. They're from K to 12 in that school, so they've got various lockdowns for various things. And their application that loads first, that actually does their security, blocks everything.
Okay.
Until you log in. So
then you're going to have a real problem using those terminals, most likely. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It's one of these things where it's almost like in a doctor's office. You have lockdown systems there because of HIPAA.
Right. I understand that. So these are machines that were set aside to go to recycling.
Okay.
So the school doesn't want them.
Okay.
School's given permission to use them not on their network, but on the side to teach.
Okay.
Okay, I've got memory, so I can move them up from 4 gig to 12 gig probably total in memory.
Believe me, you can get by with 8 without any problem. Just
I've got so many sticks that I can play around with so that I can get 8. They'll have at least 8 on them.
that's fine.
Okay,
Now,
so
in that case, I would, if they're quote junk, I'd blow away 10 and load Linux instead.
I want to give a fallback.
That might be a problem.
That's why not the dual boot. That's why not the dual boot.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying because of the lockdown nature of those devices right now, the software that's loaded in, particularly that loads up right at the beginning of the boot process, it's going to drive you nuts.
No, I can blow that whole thing out of there.
Well, then that's what I'm saying.
I do a factory reset on the 10, and I get rid of all of that crap.
Well, that includes 10.
No.
Oh, it does. It takes factory reset. The 10 will still be there, but it's still locked down. Not quite as bad. Oh yeah, it's still locked down for if you want to use a Linux environment.
I create a single new user.
I don't care. It don't matter. It has to do with the Windows that's in there is going to be under secure boot.
No, the BIOS doesn't have secure boot. It's off. I checked that in the BIOS.
Then they're using that piece of software that loads first. That's locking everything down. It's acting. It's acting like
firewall, a major
no,
firewall.
no. It's working like group policies. Group policies can really go down to the nth degree on what you can and cannot do on any given.
I'm aware. I did group policies with my server classes.
Right.
Okay, so that all goes away when I reformat the machine to just Windows.
Okay.
Because those files are all gone. They're all gone. I did one, the thing here. It takes me about 2 hours to do one.
Woo.
Yeah, they're not fast.
No, yeah, apparently not. Well, with an i3, you're if it's old enough, it only has 2 cores instead of 4.
Correct.
And you can't change that.
I understand that. I don't want to change that. That's money. I don't want to spend any money.
Oh, well, I probably have processors, but they won't go in that machine because it's they're soldered onto the motherboard.
Right. No, don't worry. If I can make it work the way it is with what I've got, I'm good. If not, they can go to the recycler.
I would have to look into that, but I know you can do separate drives, period, and get each one as a select. Which one do you want to run from the Windows prompt, which is what you
I don't
want.
want to. Okay,
you got to have the Windows prompt come up.
No, if I don't do a dual boot.
No, this has nothing to do with dual boot itself. If you're going to have a Windows drive and a Linux drive, there's got to be a way you can get into either one, and that comes up front.
Then it's called this. It is called this. You change the fucking wires on the hard drive.
Peter, the bottom line is it's when you're starting to boot up, you got to have what amounts to a Windows screen that says, do you want Windows 10 or do you want the Linux? And it will give you the right one.
I don't want that option for the kids. I want them when they turn it on, it goes to Linux, or if I choose not by taking the hardware wire off the hard drive and moving it to the other hard drive.
Okay, you're going to go into each machine and change
There's
that
only three.
cable?
There's only three.
I don't care what they are. I'm saying you're talking about going to each machine and only having one of two physical drives hooked up at a time. I've done this before.
Correct.
And that is
Correct.
good. I've done this myself. But it's also a pain in the butt if you have to switch back and forth between the two drives fairly frequently.
Remember, I'm not touching their the lab's hardware for the school kids.
Okay.
That's going to stay the same.
I'm
This
just
is
telling
totally
you,
on the side.
most people would not want to do what you or I are talking about, where you would have two drives in there, but only one is actually hooked up at a time, and you only have the OS that's on that one drive to use.
That also clears the problem if the 10th grader goes in there with the USB stick to redo the Linux because he wants to play around with a new Linux, and the Windows drive happens to be in the hard slot, and then he blows away the Windows drive.
No, if it's done right, you can have both there, like I was originally talking about, and only the boot drive would be the one that's affected. It's a headache, but if you want to do it that way, I've done it myself. I've got a couple machines here that I do that on, but I only change them once in a blue moon to be able to switch from a Linux to a Windows or a Windows to a Linux. We're talking the most frequent would be like once a month in order to update the Windows, and then I might go back to Linux.
Once a month. I'm not even seeing once a month to change over.
Well, it depends upon what you're doing and why you're doing it.
It's finalized right now. They're not doing any updates on it, any major updates. They're just doing little baby patches.
Yeah, I understand. But the thing is, when you got two drives and only one's hooked at a time, you got to go in and switch them in order to be able to go get your updates at least once a month.
Or whatever. Okay, so Bob, your thoughts on this?
This particular setup you're talking about is not one that's familiar to me. I have done Windows and Linux using the Windows boot manager, using a third-party boot manager, which would be, I think it's FreeBSD, which would I also cover both operating systems, or by doing Grub. Grub can be set up in a separate partition, especially if you're using EFI boot, and that separate partition is not affected by anything that goes on in the Linux root partition, where most of your Linux would be installed. You can also do that on separate drives, as Tim said. And if you're just doing like, wires or jumpers or something like that inside the laptop, or if you're physically taking one drive out and putting a new drive in, yeah, it's kind of a pain, but what Tim said does apply. If you're doing it at the most once a month, it's not going to be that much of a big deal for 3 computers. I mean, I deal with something like 7 operating systems on 4 different devices every month by way of updates. So you've got less to do than I do.
Is that all?
So they are small form factor or medium form factor desktops.
Yeah, I have.
So there's room.
I have SFFs, and I also have the micro USFF format. And Bob has the NUX, which is even smaller still. And then you have the regular size desktops, but they vary in size from real tall ones for servers down to mini ones that are about, I'd say
Here's the size.
a foot
Here's
high.
the size.
But you have bays
Well,
for
yeah.
you
Well,
have bays for multiple drives. You
I
have bays
have-
for
Yeah, there's room in there.
Well, I have Optiplex 3010, 3020, 3060, 3070, and the last two are M's for the USFF format, which is the 7 by 7 by about an inch and a half thick.
Okay, so my second, since we beat this dead horse, my second question, and this has to go with small form factor PCs. Have any of you gotten any thoughts on Geekom GEEKOM mini PCs? Any experience?
Pass that by again one more time.
Okay, so I'm looking. Margaret's machine is on its last leg,
Okay.
and I'm thinking replacing it with something with one of the minis. So this is the super small form factors, and I'm worried about the manufacturer because on Amazon the reviews are mixed all over the place. There's a lot of high ones, and then there's some low ones that ring bells in me. Okay, so
what's their name again?
Geekom.
Haven't heard of that one.
Geekom?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. I've heard of geek.com, which is a company that's doing small form factor.
Isn't DCOM a manufacturer's name?
Could be.
Yes.
That's what I
It's in
thought.
Korea.
I have not heard that one. And a lot of what I do instead of Amazon, which is a higher price, I go to eBay and I have tons of stuff that I get off of there. And I can get SFFs, I can get micros or minis or USFF units. All three of those are the 7-inch by 7-inch by inch and a half. And then you have NUCs that you can get, and a lot of times you can get some inexpensive ones there. But it depends what you are going to do. And I'm not joking. With an SFF unit, if needed, you can get a low profile graphics card to plug in that offloads from the CPU and memory all your decoding of any video you see on the screen. And that includes, in particular, Zoom. Now, it's very rare, but can be available in NUCs and the micro computers that are 7 by 7 by 1.5. And the situation is that some of them can have a graphics card in them. But under Dell, you have to order it that way. I have not seen any third-party option. Under HP, if you get the right unit, there is a plug that a graphics card for Radeon RX 540X will plug into that has, I think, 4 gigs of memory. It runs $60, but you have to have a 150 watt power supply that HP machines want. That'll cost you maybe $40. And that doesn't include shipping and taxes.
Okay, so let me tell you the specs on Intel Core i7, the 1139 90H, 8 threads, 5 gig, 32 bits, 32 gigabyte DDR4, a terabyte SSD, Windows 11 Pro.
Well, after that dash, that 11 says 11th generation. Anything that's 8th generation above can run 11 Pro or 11 Home.
Okay,
And
so it's preloaded with 11 Pro.
Pardon?
Preloaded with 11 Pro.
That's fine. It doesn't matter whether it's preloaded or not. It could come with no OS, and you can get your own copy straight from good old Microsoft. The license is in the motherboard in a chip. So you don't worry about the license. And that's been true for more than 5 years. In fact, it actually goes back about almost 10 years that they stopped using the label.
Yeah. Okay, so it's got all the USB 4, Wi-Fi 6, UHD 8K up to 3 monitors.
Most systems in the last 5 years that are desktop style can handle at least 3 monitors. In fact,
So this is a small.
This here, one of these machines, that handles 3 monitors too. So what? It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best choice depending on what it is you want to do. And with AI and 3D stuff, you may
Not even to worry about AI or 3D. This is my wife. She reads books online and occasionally
that is that is so overkill for doing something like that. You're better off buying a Chromebook. I'm serious when I say it. Chromebook.
She's got glasses worse than
It
mine.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you've ever looked at a Chromebook, go into a store and look at a Chromebook. Trust me, it's all quite possible with a Chromebook. I've used them for over a decade.
Okay, so these are coming in at about $450.
Oh yeah, at least, and some of them will go even higher than that.
I've seen this particular one is at $450.
I understand that, but there are other models just like it with a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that, and they can go up to a couple $1,000s.
I understand. That's not the point. The point is I'm trying to keep it down in price.
Okay, a Chromebook for under $200 is more than ample. If you describe correctly what she is doing on the computer. I'm serious when I say it.
There's one other thing. She does our taxes on it. So it's got to load Windows programs.
Windows what?
Windows programs. Because TurboTax
are they MS 365?
No.
What are the Windows programs then? Are you loading them in locally or are you using MS 365?
It's locally. TurboTax and tax cut.
Okay, even with a local machine, you could go get an older system that's a hell of a lot cheaper than that, probably no more than $200. And you would be able to have Windows 11 Pro on the damn thing. I've got them. I'm sitting here in front of 4 of these machines. And I got another one sitting over there. And that one, I would like to change the processor on, but at the moment, I haven't figured out how to do so. It does have
there's one other consideration I have here. I want to give her one more machine while I'm alive, and I don't want to touch it.
These are what I'm playing with here that I just showed you. These are business class. These are not consumer class. Consumer class is crap compared to a business class machine. I've got a business class machine in front of me here that has been running for more than 15 years. Show me a consumer class that'll go 15 years.
You can't. They don't.
So bottom line, I think you would have to give me more information what she does on the machine, whether it's local or in the cloud for the software. But I'm betting you right now that one of the machines I've got is more than adequate. It handles 3 monitors, which she ain't going to ever use.
I'm only going to use one monitor ever.
And this damn thing can cost under $200, and it's business class, and it runs 11 Pro. And I got 2 others sitting here, and one over there that's running 11 Pro, same size format. And then I've got bigger machines, SSF, and full towers that are all running Windows 11.
Okay, Tim.
I'm frugal on this stuff. I go lowball on all my stuff.
Okay, Tim, give me the specs on one of those small form factors that you just picked up in an email, okay?
All right. I'll even give you an SFF if you want to do that route. I'm serious. And if she's doing a drawing of some kind, use. I thought you said she was doing drawing in Windows software.
No, I do the drawing in Windows. She views ebooks,
Okay.
watches some streaming video from Amazon or whatever.
Are you guys sharing the same machine? That's important.
No.
Okay. Then again, your wife can go with a Chromebook. I'm dead serious.
I've got to look to see if this tax software that she uses to do our taxes will load on Android.
That ain't Android. That's Chrome OS.
Or Chrome OS, whatever.
Well, offhand, I don't know, but a lot of the software anymore doesn't do it locally on your machine. It does it online.
No. The tax software, the program is loaded locally. You go to their store to get the updates and to send the file across to the government. But the files are all locally and they're on the local hardware.
I used to do that too, but I stopped doing it. I do it online like most people are doing it anymore. They don't.
She doesn't.
They don't want it on the local drive, the software. They want the most up-to-date software every time they log into it, and that has to be online.
I'm over on the other machine for a second here.
Okay. I can get you other information. I'm not joking.
Yeah. Wrong.
But really, the way you're talking, and I am a little bit skeptical of it. A Chromebook is even more than she needs. Not a joke. You can get by with tablet readers for what she seems to do.
No, she's got a tablet reader. It needs more than that. Because she can't load and she also can't Bluetooth to her hearing aids.
Hearing aids?
Yeah.
Are they connected connected Wi-Fi or Bluetooth?
Bluetooth.
Yeah, well, Chromebook will handle that too. almost everything has Bluetooth, except for traditional desktops where you have to get a dongle. And I don't have quick access here. Oh, maybe I do. No, don't have it readily handy. I used to have it out here. It's basically, if you know what a wireless adapter for a Logitech mouse or keyboard, it almost looks the same thing. It's strictly for Bluetooth, and you plug it into a USB port in the back of a computer, and you got on a traditional desktop, and you got Bluetooth. Now, if you want Wi-Fi, you got to have a more recent machine. I got an HP Elite Desk 800. I think it's a G4. And I didn't know it at first, but I'm always looking inside of the machines and tinkering. And I found that it had an M.2 Wi-Fi port. So I got one of my extra Wi-Fi cards, stuck it in, but I couldn't use it right away. Why? Because that requires an antenna. So I had to go online to eBay. I got one with antenna leads that go far enough to reach from the back plates to the Wi-Fi card easily. And then you put in a back plate that has two connectors, and you put on screw on two antennas that come with it, and you got total Wi-Fi along with Ethernet on an SFF that I've got. Some of the other desktop machines that are more modern, at least I would say 8th gen Intel or better, may have an M.2. It's a 2042 slot for a Wi-Fi card. And you just get the Wi-Fi card, you get this antenna kit that's for a back slot. The key is getting the right length of the cable. In these small form factor ones, 15 centimeters is a little bit big, but 10 meters is centimeters is too small. Whereas in that SFF, I think I had to go 35 or 40 centimeters for the cables. And sometimes that's hard to find. But it's quite doable. I've got Wi-Fi on it. I got a Wi-Fi on all these small form factor ones that didn't come with Wi-Fi. I put my own card in. I got my own antennas, and with originally they came with 8-inch cable. I recently picked up 6-inch cables, and I'm replacing them now. I've got one replaced. I got 3 more. I got to do the same thing on, because the 8-inch cables, there's too much that you got to coil up, and you might have a problem of when you're putting the cover on or putting in the 2.5-inch drive bay. And you can use 2.5-inch drives. You can use M.2 NVMe drives on it. And one model I've got here allows for dual M.2 NVMe's and a Wi-Fi M.2 card. So it's even more expansive. Plus, I can also use the 2.5-inch drive bay. These are all possibilities. This is my bailiwick, hardware, the operating systems, and tools to maintain a happy system. But if you want to get that Windows 11, that 11th generation computer, at least for yourself, you're going to use it. you will have a good system. But to get that for your wife, it would hardly get used. She could run her whole thing off of a flash drive. Seriously. Anybody else got a comment on that?
I do agree about used business class small computers or laptops. They will hold up for a very long time, and they do tend to have much more than much more than your wife will need.
Oh yeah, and that's not a joke. In a manner of speaking, even one of these units like this here, this is an 8th generation Intel running 11 Pro supported. It's got, I had to add the Wi-Fi to it. That's where this antenna comes in. It's one antenna with one lead to the Wi-Fi card I put in. I put in an M.2 NVMe PCIe 3X4 drive in, and I still can use a 2.5 inch. I'm going to be changing the processor in this particular unit. I've got one coming to me. Right now, it's got an i3 processor. It's called a T-type, and it's low power. That's what the T really stands for. And I'm going to change it out to an i7. But this i3 performs real well, way beyond my expectations that I thought I would have on an i3. So an i3 8th generation does a pretty damn good job. And I'm not joking when I say that. I have another machine here, an Optiplex. It's got an i5 9th gen processor in it. And I've got another one that's got I'm pretty sure it's an i3 8th gen Intel chip in it. It runs great too. And the only other one I've got is one that's got a Ryzen 2400G chip. And I would like to replace that with a Ryzen 5 2600 or preferably a Ryzen 7 2700. And I'm looking at the wattage of the CPU. But a G card, G CPU has a built-in graphics processor. And without that, so far, if I put in one of the other chips, I got no video. So it makes it pretty useless on that aspect. But if I can figure out how to get a different chip into that unit, I'll be happy as all get out. The unit I got with that Radeon RX 540X discrete graphics processor. It goes in place of a 2.5 inch tray for a 2.5 inch drive, whether it's spinning or a solid state drive. And I'm just running off of a NVMe M.2 drive. So it's one of those things.
So I brought up the TurboTax page, which is a preferred software, and it only goes on to Windows or Apple. And it's got to be a 10 or later, 64-bit, and the business will only go on to Windows. So the one that I use for the LLC will only go to Windows. So that cuts out Android, Chrome, and I'm not going to buy an Apple.
I wouldn't either, unless I really wanted one. I ain't got them kind of bucks, and I'm not going to go out and rob a bank, a business, or people on the street in order to come up with the cash. Besides that, with Apple products, you only get 5 to 6 years, and then you got to get a new machine because you can't upgrade it. The old one will keep running just like Windows 8, 7, and XP will run, but do you really want to have an outdated, obsolete system that has no security updates?
Yeah, so it looks like I'm on Windows 10 or 11. It doesn't need the horsepower that other machine has.
Okay, now that gives you options. Now, as an example, the Linux machine I'm on here is one of those small machines. It's a 7th generation system. Okay, 7th generation Intel processor. You can run 10 on it or Linux, but you can't run 11 unless it's unsupported. You can run unsupported 11, but I don't recommend it. There's an update coming this fall that might obsolete that. But a 8th gen or 9th gen, you can probably get between $150 and $250, and it'll run anything that on an 11 Pro. Because
Okay.
I've got it.
That's why I bring this up.
Well, I'm charging you for it too. I'll be sending you the invoice with it.
And I'll pay you in pennies.
Okay, that's
Liberal at the dock in Maui.
I want all that copper, and I can sell that copper for more than a penny.
Not if I give you the zinc pennies.
Oh, yeah, but they got a fair amount of zinc. They got a fair amount of copper.
They're flashed now. The
I
new
know.
pennies are.
I used to be a numismatist. But anyway, that's generally what I'm suggesting. I've got plenty of machines that I can throw at you. And if it's for her, that includes Nuxes. So you got 2 different size computers. Correct me if I'm wrong, Robert. It's about a 5x5 by about anywhere between 1 and 3 inches high for a Nux.
Well, that depends. Nucs are changing.
Yeah,
not just because Asus took over the support. They've always had a sort of an ultra model or a performance model, which is significantly bigger but can hold a GPU.
Right.
And it has a good power supply.
Well, they had like the Nux Skull or something like that. Al Cheeks had.
It's more than that. There are several different classes of NUC now, and they have different form factors, slightly different. The one I've got, that class of them will not take on an internal graphics card, and if you want an external enclosed graphics card, you're probably going to need an external power supply.
Right.
So there are different ways of doing that with small form factor.
Right, and in fact, there's also in Nux there is a plug-in card to a desktop unit that takes up 2 back slots, and it's a full Nux computer.
There are models that will do that.
Yeah, and why you'd want to do that, I haven't figured out yet.
Sometimes you want to use them in multiple units in a rack in certain industrial applications.
Maybe that's what they were.
They're called embedded systems.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes more sense than what I was thinking. I got a cat here that wants my attention and digs her claws right in my knee. All right. Do we got anything else to cover? It's almost 9:30 my time.
Right.
If that's going to be it, then I'll probably call it quits for the night and bid you all adieu.
Well, thanks for the meeting.
Say aloha.
All right. Good night.
Thought that was a very good video, very clear.
That's why I want a link on it, because my email does.
What does that announcement say?
There is usually a document that is shared at the end of the meeting in chat.
It always has been. How come? Okay.